There's walking and talking, live streaming, chat weaving, and hoping to find our best view of Duckland. The ducks keep on floating, keep paddling and cracking, some sparkling, come waddling toward us ducks.
All right, we are going to do 2022 Men's NCAA Bracket March Madness. I'm going to pick my bracket here. We need a little bit of a distraction from Russia and all of the craziness going on around the world. So I'm going to pick my March Madness bracket here on this video. And normally, I'm a pretty big sports fan. Normally, Mrs. Land is a pretty big sports fan. But at the moment, I have not followed college basketball all that much this year. Really at all, frankly. Other than the one or two teams that we directly follow. So I have very little knowledge going into this bracket. I'm going to base this based on pretty much the top of my head. And we'll see how accurate this turns out to be. So, this is the bracket. For anybody that doesn't know, the NCAA tournament happens every year here in March, colloquially known as March Madness. 64, really 68 teams meet in the big bracket. Games are held all around the country over about 3 weeks, and they slowly winnow themselves down from 64 teams to 32, to the Sweet 16, to the Elite 8, to the Final Four, and then a national championship pairing that I guess this year will happen in New Orleans. So that'll happen about 3 weeks from now. So I am going to pull up the internet so we can do this in a little bit more of a interactive, graphic way. This has also challenged me to try to figure out what the logos of these teams are. So our first matchup here is between the top overall seed in the tournament, which is Gonzaga, which is a school in Spokane, Washington. They are 26-3 against the 16 seed here, Georgia State. And I don't know what their team mascot is, but it always makes sense to pick the number 1 seed. So we're going to pick Gonzaga here in the first matchup. All right, the second matchup here of the tournament features the 8 seed, who is Boise State, against the 9 seed, Memphis, 21-10. Boise State is 27-7, Memphis is 21-10. Memphis is a super iconic historic basketball program, so I'm going to pick them to win the 9 versus 8 upset here over Boise State. That brings us to what looks like the 5 versus 12 matchup here between the Yukon Huskies and the New Mexico State something or others. Looks like that guy he might be an Aggie. I don't know. Looks like I think the Huskies going to win, though. Yukon, another iconic, classic basketball program, hard to pick against them. That brings us to the Arkansas Razorbacks, the 4 seed here, against the 13 seed Vermont. I think they're the Catamounts. So we're talking like Pumas here against Razorback Pigs. Arkansas is the 4 seed again out of the SEC. 25-8, that's a pretty good record out of the SEC. So I don't know. Vermont looks good. I could definitely see Vermont winning an upset here. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Arkansas because they're the favorite. All right. The 6th seed here is Alabama. They're 19-13. Now, that is not a great record. I assume they must have had a tough schedule of some kind. And they are playing against the 11th seed Rutgers, who I think is a pretty dangerous team, actually. Rutgers, I guess, won a play-in game against Notre Dame. So I'm going to go ahead here and pick the upset, the State University of New Jersey, the Big R, Rutgers, to win an upset there in the first round. That brings us to the 3 seed, the Texas Tech Red Raiders, the TTs, against the 14 seed Montana State. I'm not sure what that is, but it is kind of a weak logo, actually. A little bit underdone there, whatever kind of cat that is. Texas Tech is 25-9, Montana State 27-7. Texas Tech, the 3 seed. Hard to pick against a 3 seed. We're going to go Texas Tech here in the first round. Which brings us to the 7 seed Michigan State, 22-12. A lot of people have been picking them to lose here in an upset. Against the 10 seed Davidson at 27-6. Now, I really like Michigan State. I think it's a shame they've been devastated by injuries to the extent they have. I love their coach, Tom Izzo. This is probably a trendy upset pick. Davidson has a history of doing okay in the NCAA tournament. I am tempted by Michigan State here, but I think I'm going to go Davidson with the 10-7 upset here in the first round. Which brings us to the 2-15 matchup between classic Duke. Mike Krzyzewski's final season as coach of the Duke Blue Devils. They are 28-6. They are playing against Cal State Fullerton, who is 21-10. I'm not picking the 15 seed. That's a little bit of an underbaked logo for Cal State Fullerton there. So I'm going to go with Duke here in the first round. All right, this brings us to the second quadrant of the bracket, which is, I guess, the east quadrant of the bracket. The first quadrant was, let's see, that was the west quadrant. That's why Gonzaga was the 1 seed down there. So the east quadrant here, he has the number 1 seed Baylor, the Baylor Bears. Are they the defending national champions? I think they are. Here against the 16 seed Norfolk State. What are those? Spartans, I guess. That is an old logo that has not been updated. That looks like a high school logo. So let's go with Baylor here in the first round. That brings us to the 8 seed, the North Carolina Tar Heels at 24-9 versus the 9 seed Marquette Golden Eagles. They are 19-12. 24-9 out of the ACC. It's a pretty good record, actually, North Carolina. I'm tempted by an upset here, but I'm going to go ahead and pick North Carolina here to win in the first round. This brings us to the 5 seed St. Mary's Gales, 25-7. And they will not actually be playing the Cowboy there. That Cowboy is actually in lieu of Indiana, who I guess won that first round. So let me see here. I guess I'm not so sure Rutgers actually was going to show up in that first round either. We got to be careful here. They might have put in some teams that actually are not going to be in the tournament. But Indiana played Wyoming here in a first-round play-in game, I believe last night. And Indiana won that game. Indiana's playing St. Mary's now in the first round. St. Mary's the 5 seed, Indiana the 12 seed. I like Indiana. I think they're a good team. St. Mary's, I don't know. St. Mary's, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and pick an upset here. I'm going to pick Indiana to beat St. Mary's here in the first round. Indiana, of course, represented by the Wyoming Cowboy there, because whoever made this bracket wasn't paying attention. All right, this brings us to the 4-13 matchup here between UCLA and Akron. UCLA at 25-7, Akron 24-9. We're going to go ahead and pick UCLA, iconic blue blood of college basketball. This brings us to the 6-11 matchup between Texas and Virginia Tech. Texas 21-11, Virginia Tech 23-12. Let's pick Texas, the Longhorns, to advance. Brings us to the 3 seed Purdue, who is 27-7 against Yale, the Ivy League representative. I always like to see the Ivy League schools here in the NCAA tournament. Yale, I don't think is getting it done, though. Purdue is a very good team. I'm going to go ahead and pick Purdue here. I think Purdue is the regular season Big Ten champion. That brings us to the 7 seed Murray State, the Racers, versus the 10 seed San Francisco. Can't remember what their name is, but that is one ugly logo for them. So Murray State 30-2. Let's go ahead and pick them to advance here. Which brings us to the 2 seed Kentucky, the Wildcats, college basketball blue blood against the 15 seed here St. Peter's. Never seen that logo before. Anyway, Kentucky's going to win here in the first round. So we're going to tackle the second, third, fourth round games here in this side of the bracket before we go to the other side of the bracket. This is a second round matchup here between Gonzaga, who was the top overall seed in the tournament, versus Memphis, 21-10. I think Gonzaga will advance here at this point over Memphis. I think they're probably going to lose at some point in the tournament. Not quite yet. They're going to advance here in the second round. That brings us to a second round matchup here between Yukon, the 5 seed, versus Arkansas, the 4 seed. Yukon 23-9, Arkansas 25-8. Yukon is always dangerous in these tournaments, so I think I'm going to go ahead here and pick Yukon. Which brings us to Rutgers. I should probably Google this to make sure Rutgers actually is advancing here. I guess they're playing today, so we don't know yet if Rutgers is in the tournament or not, but this will either be Rutgers or Notre Dame. And either way, we said they were likely to win here in the first round, and they'll be up against the 3 seed Texas Tech. So I think in this case, Texas Tech as the 3 seed is going to advance and beat Rutgers. Which brings us to this second round matchup between Davidson and Duke. Well, I am confident that Mike Krzyzewski is going to have his troops together here to beat Davidson in the second round. Duke is the team I have advancing here in the second round, which brings us to, now in the East Quadrant, the top seed Baylor against college basketball blue blood North Carolina, the 8th seed. Tough draw for Baylor here. Baylor's a good team. North Carolina is a tough second round matchup for them. I think it is very possible North Carolina could win this in an upset, but I'm not confident enough to actually pick it, so I'm going to go ahead and pick Baylor here to win in the second round. Which brings us to this matchup featuring Indiana, of course represented here by the Wyoming Cowboy. They beat Wyoming last night. Against UCLA, college basketball's blue blood. UCLA 25-7 this year. I think I am going to pick, for a game being held on the West Coast there in Portland, I think I'm going to pick UCLA to beat Indiana here in the second round. Which brings us to a matchup between Texas, the 6th seed, Texas 21-11, versus the 3 seed Purdue, 27-7. Big Ten has had a rough go of the tournament in recent years. Purdue hasn't advanced in a major way in a while, but they seem like a really good team this year, so I'm going to go ahead and pick Purdue. I know a lot of people were picking Texas as an upset pick in the tournament here early on, so more confident in Purdue's ability to advance. Which brings us to the matchup between 2 Kentucky schools here, Murray State at 30-2, and the Kentucky Wildcats here, the 2 seed at 26-7. Interesting, Murray State 30-2, that's a tough record. That's a very good record. I don't think Kentucky is quite the elite team they have been in years past. Nevertheless, I'm not confident enough in an upset to pick it here, so I'm going to go ahead and pick the Kentucky Wildcats, college basketball blue blood, to advance to the third round here in the Sweet 16. So, Sweet 16 matchup here between top overall seed Gonzaga versus the 5 seed Yukon here at 23-9. All right, Gonzaga, very, very good team. They have a track record of losing in the tournament, although I think they made it all the way to the championship game last year, if I'm not mistaken. Can Gonzaga advance here over Yukon? I'm not even sure that Yukon is going to advance this far. I'm not positive they're going to beat Arkansas in the previous round, so I'm going to hedge my bets here, and I'm going to go ahead and pick the favorite, Gonzaga, to beat Yukon here in the Sweet 16 and advance to the Elite 8. Congratulations, Gonzaga. Which brings us to this matchup between Texas Tech at 25-9 and Duke, the 2 seed at 28-6. Again, Mike Krzyzewski's final year here in the NCAA tournament. I think that Duke is going to outlast Texas Tech and advance their way to the Elite 8, where they will meet Gonzaga, I believe. All right, another Sweet 16 matchup here back in the East Quadrant between Baylor, the top seed down there, against UCLA, who is the 4 seed. UCLA 25-7, good record. Baylor 26-6. Baylor defending national champions. I think Baylor is going to advance again. They got a good team, and they're going to beat UCLA here in the Sweet 16. which brings us to a matchup between Purdue and Kentucky. Purdue, the 3 seed, 27-7. Kentucky, the 2 seed, 26-7. Kentucky struggled at times this year. They had a really elite recruiting class this year that has finally gelled here late in the year and has finally gotten it together. This is a tough matchup. I think Purdue's a good team. Can they beat Kentucky? This is one of the toughest choices I've had to make so far. Let me look something up here real quick. So we're going to look at some statistical computer ratings to try to figure out who is better between Purdue and Kentucky. I've not looked at any statistical ratings so far in trying to make my evaluations here. Purdue looks like they are ever so slightly statistically worse than Kentucky, according to the statistical model. So let's go ahead and pick Kentucky to advance here at this early juncture. Kentucky. Congratulations, Kentucky. You are advancing to the Elite Eight. All right. This brings us to I guess this is for entry into the Final Four here between Gonzaga, the top-rated team in the country by a sizable margin, actually, versus Duke here. Duke, I guess, the 11th highest computer-rated team in the country. Gonzaga, the top-rated computer-rated team. I don't know. I mean, I think Krzyzewski has a good program. Is he going to be toppled by Gonzaga here? It's tough. It's tough. Gonzaga's got a good team. I never have a lot of faith in Gonzaga. I just think they're not... They play in a weak conference, and therefore they don't get battle-tested during the regular season, and the recruiting classes sometimes aren't quite there. So is Gonzaga actually the best team? Well, the statistics say yes, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick Gonzaga here to make the Final Four. Congratulations, Gonzaga. I don't have a lot of trust in you, but I'm picking you anyway at this juncture. Which brings us to Baylor. Baylor is the top seed here in the East region, and they are pitted here against Kentucky, who is also a very good team. Kentucky, the number 6 computer-rated team in the country. Baylor, the number 4. So, will Baylor return to the national championship, or will they get knocked out here in the round of 8? That is a tough, tough pick here. Baylor versus Kentucky. This is Bears against Wildcats. If a Bear fought a Wildcat, who would win that? It's tough. Those are two powerful animals. Should look up some videos of bears fighting against wildcats. Now, wildcat's not the same thing as like a lion. I think a lion might be able to take down a bear. Baylor against Kentucky here. Tough, tough, tough. Part of the reason this is tough is that Kentucky is gelling here late in the season. They, of course, are playing Baylor, who is a pretty darn good team. Well, let's try to set up here the rematch in the Final Four. So I'm going to pick Baylor to beat Kentucky here and knock them out here in the round of 8. So Baylor, congratulations on advancing, which brings us to a Final Four matchup between Gonzaga and Baylor. This will be a rematch of last year's national championship game, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. I didn't look that up ahead of time, so if I'm wrong about that, sorry. Anyway, Gonzaga the Bulldogs, Baylor the Bears. They are going to play here in the Final Four. Gonzaga against Baylor. Gonzaga statistically computer rated a little bit better, by just a little bit. Well, will they get their revenge on Baylor here in the Final Four? What am I going to pick here? No. Baylor is going to beat Gonzaga here in the Final Four and advance to the national championship game. This brings us to the other side of the bracket. And the other side of the bracket here is going to feature Arizona. Arizona, the number 2 statistical rated team here in the country. Arizona has a record on the season of, let's see, what is Arizona's record here? 31-3. That's a pretty good record. Arizona is going to play against Wright State / Bryant. I guess that's Wright State, who presumably will advance here. I'm not sure if they have already played here. Let me check this out. So they play today. So it'll be one of the other team. Arizona's going to win that game probably by a pretty big margin. So they are going to advance. And this brings us to the second matchup here on this side of the bracket between Seton Hall, there on the left, and TCU. So Seton Hall sitting there at 21-10. TCU there at 20-12. Seton Hall, the 33rd ranked statistical team in the country. Let's see. TCU, the 43rd ranked team. So Seton Hall always seems to be a mainstay in that 8-9 part of the bracket every time they're in the tournament. Which brings us to a matchup here between Houston, the 5 seed, 29-5, against UAB, fire-breathing dragon thing, 27-7. UAB wins the logo there, but Houston is going to win this game. All right, now we've got a matchup between Illinois at 22-9 against Chattanooga at 27-7. Illinois, the 4 seed here, is a good team. Let's see, where does Illinois fall in the statistical rankings here? Illinois. Number 15 in the statistical rankings here against Chattanooga. Chattanooga, what is their record? 27-7. It's hard to pick against Illinois. I know they struggled in the tournament last year, I believe. But I'm going to go ahead and pick them. I do like their team, and they are a little bit battle-tested because they were here a year ago. So this brings us to a matchup here between Colorado State at 25-5. Let's see. They are the 37th ranked team versus Michigan. Michigan, a bubble team, but one that has made the tournament anyway. The 24th ranked team in the country. This is, I think, definitely looking like it is stacked to be an upset here. Michigan is actually statistically higher ranked here than Colorado State. So Michigan is going to win here in the first round. That brings us to a matchup here between 3 seed Tennessee at 26-7 versus the 14 seed Longwood, who I have never heard of as a school. So anyway, congratulations Longwood for making the NCAA tournament. Tennessee at the 3 seed here, I think is looking pretty sharp. Let's see, how good is Tennessee here? They are statistically the 7th toughest team in the country. Okay, Tennessee. We're going to have them advance here in the early going, which brings us to a matchup between Ohio State, who, I don't know, they seem pretty skittish this year, frankly. Ohio State, the 21st ranked statistical team in the country here at 19-11, but definitely struggled down the stretch. I think actually they're 19-12 now. 19-11, 19-12. Not sure. Anyway, they are playing here against Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago is a tough team. For some reason, I feel like Loyola Chicago has won some upsets in the tournament before. Am I misremembering that or not? At any rate, will Ohio State go down for the 2nd straight year in the first round? I think very possibly. We're going to go ahead and pick Loyola Chicago to upset Ohio State here in the first round. This brings us to the 2 seed Villanova, 26-7. Villanova versus the 15 seed Delaware at 22-12. Villanova, good team, not going to be upset by a 15 seed. Although, you got to like that blue hen logo there for Delaware. Villanova advancing. All right, we're now in our final quadrant of the bracket, the Midwest quadrant. This quadrant is headed by Kansas, the 1 seed, here at 28-6, versus Texas Southern. That's the logo for Texas Southern? Really? Anyhow, that's a bad logo if it is. Anyhow, this is going to be won by Kansas here in the first round. All right, that brings us to a matchup between San Diego State, the 8th seed, versus Creighton, the 9th seed. San Diego State, the 32nd ranked team in the country statistically here. They are ranked a little bit ahead of Creighton. So I'm going to go ahead and pick San Diego State. I don't really like Creighton either. All right, this brings us to a matchup between Iowa, the 5 seed, 26 and 9, against Richmond, the 12 seed. So Iowa, 13th in the country statistically, versus Richmond, who is, let's see, what did we do with Richmond down here? Richmond. Where are you? Well, 75th. Wow. Okay, Iowa's going to win this game. Hawkeyes. All right, so after the Iowa game, that brings us to a matchup between the 4 seed Providence and the 13 seed South Dakota State. So Providence is the 4 seed here. Let's see, what is Providence in terms of their statistical ranking here? Probably not as high as their seed, 35th. So they are the 35th ranked team. They are up here against South Dakota State. Where are they here in the bracket? Number 76. All right, Providence, overrated, nevertheless, are going to advance. That was a cool logo for South Dakota State, nevertheless. LSU, the 6th seed. They are 22 and 11 versus Iowa State, the 11 seed. So LSU, let's see, where is LSU here in our rankings? LSU is the number 19 team in the country statistically. They are up here against Iowa State, who's number 60. Okay, LSU, always dangerous in the tournament. We're going to pick LSU to advance here in the first round, which brings us to the 7 seed USC against the 10 seed Miami, Florida. So, the Trojans of USC, 30th in the country, here up against Miami, Florida, who is, let's see, where is Miami, Florida? Miami, the Hurricanes, number 65. Okay, USC, the Trojans. Congratulations, Trojans, you are advancing. That brings us to the 2 seed, the Auburn Tigers at 27 and 5. Really dominant in the SEC this year. They're playing Jacksonville State. They are the Gamecocks, I guess. Feels like they should be the Jaguars. Anyhow, they're the Gamecocks. Auburn is likely to win this game. 2 seeds don't often lose. It's not really very smart to pick 2 seeds to lose unless you are absolutely certain they're going to lose. Auburn, the number 12 statistical team in the country. Let's go ahead and pick Auburn here to advance in the first round, which brings us to a second round matchup between Arizona and Seton Hall. Arizona's a good team, good record. Seton Hall, a little more middling. So Arizona, I'm going to go ahead and pick to continue advancing here to the Sweet 16 here in the second round. Brings us to a matchup between Houston, the Cougars. Not those kinds of Cougars. They're matched up against Illinois. Illinois, 22 and 9. Houston, 29 and 5. Houston's a good team. Well, Houston is a good team statistically. Illinois is also a good team. This is a tough matchup for Illinois here in the second round, but I'm going to pick Houston to beat Illinois here and advance to the Sweet 16. Which brings us to a matchup of 2 big and sort of ugly colored letters, the M and the T. Michigan is a tough team. Michigan is the 24th best team in the country according to these statistical rankings, even though their record is not so great. They've had the toughest schedule in the country, apparently. Tennessee has also had a tough schedule and performed admirably against it. I'm going to go ahead and pick Tennessee here to advance to the Sweet 16, which brings us to an L versus V matchup here between Loyola of Chicago, who's always a trendy pick, and Villanova, who is a mainstay in these tournaments, a blue blood of its own making here over the course of the last couple decades. So Villanova, I think, is good enough here to advance. They're 26 and 7. We're picking them here to head to the Sweet 16. That brings us to a matchup between Kansas and San Diego State. San Diego State is an interesting team, the Aztecs, but they're not going to beat Kansas. The Jayhawks, one of college basketball's all-time blue bloods. Kansas advances to the Sweet 16. Brings us to a matchup between Iowa, the 13th best team in the country according to these statistical rankings. And they are up against, is that Providence? I guess that's Providence. Yeah, Providence always has a very slick logo. So, Providence, the 4 seed, albeit a little bit overrated perhaps. So Iowa is going to advance here to the Sweet 16, which brings us to a matchup between two culturally very different schools. LSU here from the South against Wisconsin. This is a tight matchup. Wisconsin, the number 20 team in the country statistically, here against LSU, the number 19 team in the country statistically. This is a tight matchup. This is almost a toss-up statistically. So, in that context, I'm going to pick LSU because, I don't know, I just have this vision that they would win this matchup. All right, and that brings us to a matchup between the Trojans and the Tigers here of Southern Cal and Auburn. Interestingly, SC has the letters that sort of intertwine with each other, whereas Auburn, the A, just basically sits on top of the U. All right, interesting color schemes here for both of these teams. USC against Auburn. USC is a good team, I think. Not sure where they sit in these statistical rankings. They are 30th. Well, that is not going to compete all that well against Auburn here, who is 12th. Auburn is going to go ahead and win this matchup in the second round. So, back to the Sweet 16 matchups here at the top of the bracket. We are back up here in the South bracket, which is what Arizona is representing. They are a good team. They're going to play Houston here. This is a tough matchup for both of these teams. It's a tough Sweet 16 draw for both Arizona and Houston. I am confident Arizona is going to go ahead and beat Houston here in this game. Battle of two cats, Wildcats and Cougars. All right, Tennessee, the Volunteers versus Villanova. Villanova's the Wildcats. So, Tennessee Volunteers, Villanova Wildcats. I'm not sure why Tennessee is called the Volunteers. I'm sure there's a story behind it. Anyhow, doesn't seem that threatening. Good teams here. Tennessee, the number 7 team in the country according to these statistical rankings. Villanova, number 9. Tight matchup, actually. Wow. Very tight matchup. Tennessee is 26-7. Villanova is 26-7. They have the same records even. Wow. Well, I guess I am a little bit more confident to this point that Villanova will have made its way to this juncture in the bracket relative to Tennessee, who I think could potentially have lost by this point. So, who am I going to pick here? Well, statistically, the pick would be Tennessee. Am I confident they are going to win at this juncture, or do I think Villanova might squeak by? I guess we're picking Tennessee to advance here at this juncture, although that's a toss-up. All right, Kansas against Iowa. It's a very Midwestern matchup. Kansas is a better team than Iowa here. I got to think that Kansas is going to advance. The Jayhawks over the Hawkeyes. Both have their Hawk tie-in. Anyway, the Jayhawks, basketball blue blood, they're going to beat the Hawkeyes and advance here. Which brings us to an interesting matchup of Tigers. The Louisiana State Tigers versus the Auburn Tigers. This is also a little bit of a tight matchup. Auburn, very good all year long. LSU, pretty good all year long. I think the Orangey Tigers from Auburn are going to beat the Bayou Tigers from LSU. Auburn advances. That brings us to a matchup between Arizona, the Wildcats, versus the Tennessee Volunteers. That big orange T is not the prettiest thing in the world. So I'm going to go ahead and pick at this point the Arizona Wildcats to go ahead and beat Tennessee and advance here to, what are we on? Are we in the Final Four already? Anyway, Arizona advances. Brings us to Kansas against Auburn. A couple of good teams, but Kansas has got to advance here to the Final Four as the 1 seed out of this part of the bracket. That brings us to I picked all chalk. Anyhow, I picked all 1 seeds. Well, that wasn't super exciting. Anyhow, Arizona against Kansas. Interesting matchup here in the Final Four. Very good teams. Arizona out of the Pac-12, Kansas out of the Big 12. I think Arizona is going to advance here. Arizona really seems like a good team. It's been a while since they've been in the fray here, deep in the tournament. They're excellent. Arizona goes ahead and beats Kansas here at this juncture, which brings us to a championship game matchup between Baylor and Arizona. I have a hunch, regardless of whether Gonzaga or Baylor would won the left side of the bracket, that Arizona is going to be our national championship team this year. Okay, well, I picked Arizona. This is a little bit... oh, there's our bracket. Okay, Arizona has won the bracket here. So, anyway, congratulations, Arizona, for your victory in the NCAA tournament. I guess they probably don't even know we picked them. So, Arizona, Wildcats, team I've always kind of liked. They've been kind of in and out of the mix in the NCAA tournament in my lifetime. They played against Duke in the national final, and I want to say the year 2001, and they lost by 10 points in the national final. I believe the score was 82-72. They had beaten, I believe, both Illinois and Michigan State along the way. And off the top of my head, I want to say they beat Illinois 87-81, and they beat Michigan State 80-61. You can check me on those stats if you want to. Random sports scores I remember off the top of my head from many years ago. Anyway, Arizona hasn't been in the fray in a while. I think they are going to win the national championship this year. So, am I right? Well, who the hell knows? We're going to see the games play out over the next 3 weeks. Should be interesting regardless. There are some new teams in here that haven't been at the top of the list in a while. Interesting mix of teams. So, anyway, Arizona is the team we're picking to win the national final here in NCAA March Madness here for 2022. Once again, we'll see if we're right. We'll see if our bracket turns out to be more correct than your bracket. All right. So, for land speculation, this is land that ain't just speculation. And I guess for now, we will sign off.